Welcome back to the Parrot Podcast. I'm your host, Sandra. And today's episode, we're going to talk with a student who has a pet bird. She shares lots of educational and informational videos as well. So I thought I'd invite her onto the show and find out what it's like for a student with a pet bird, especially if you're living on campus. And I also wanted to pick her brain a little bit about wing clipping and all of these different topics that she shares on her social media, Green Wings and Things. So let's jump in and have a chat with Alex and get to know her.
They have all the chubby birds in the sticker.
Oh my gosh, I have to order it.
Yeah, I'm a little crazy when it comes to parrots. Like, this is my school backpack. I know. I'm sure the people here think I'm insane. They're probably like, what is wrong with her? I love it. I think it's just my thing. It's my little thing. And I'm sure people think I'm nuts, but that's okay. I don't mind.
You gotta be nuts. You gotta be your own type of nuts, and who cares what people think? There's a bunch of us crazy parrot ladies out there, and hello, here we are.
I've turned into one, and I'm not even mad about it, to be honest. I have embraced it at this point.
You know what? Me too. If you told me 10 years ago, Sandra, you're going to be a crazy conure lady one day, I'd be like, okay, parrots are amazing. How cool. But there's no way that I'm going to be a crazy parrot lady. Here I am running a podcast.
Yeah. That's how I am. Like, I never knew about parrots really for the longest time. I mean, of course, you see them at the zoo, whatever, but I never really knew about like them as pets until probably about 2 years ago when I started my first job. I originally got into it because it was a garden center. So I was like, oh, I'm going to work, at a garden center. That'll be fun. And then they were like, surprise, we do parrot rescue. And I was like, what? Those things scare me. And I was terrified of them. Like, I mean, terrified, especially of Kiwi, because she was like super like, wah, to me. And I'm like, well, there. I don't know what you are yet.
I'm scared. Down. Don't bite me.
And I had to feed them once. They were like, the person who does it normally is not here. Can you like put their food in there? And I was like, are you kidding me? Absolutely not. And I finally did it. And I opened the door really fast. Like, I've never opened and closed the door so fast. I was like, they're all going to attack me. And then at one point they sent me in the cage to get something. And I was like, this is nuts. Like, you're crazy. You think I'm going to go in there? And I did. And sure enough, here Kiwi comes, sits right here, just stares at me, sitting on my shoulder. And I'm like, you are scaring me right now. Like, what are you? What are you doing? I was so scared.
What are you going to do? What's your next move?
Exactly. I was like, what, are you about to eat me? Like, I was so scared of her. And I finally was like, you know what? That wasn't that bad. So I started going in there to feed them. And I was like, okay, this is my new hobby. And I was like, I just evolved.
Oh, quickly that
maybe
changed.
I want one. I was like, maybe I want one now. And I was like, okay, but I don't know anything about these. Like, because I didn't sign up to do the rescue. I just kind of fell into feeding them one day. And I was like, you know what? This is kind of cool. And then now I'm insane and just have filled my brain to the brim with knowledge if I can.
There's nothing more that bird moms love to do than to talk about their birds. So, Alex, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you. Tell everybody your social media handle, your birds or your bird, and what species, their name, and whatever else you want to share with us about them.
Okay, so as I said, I'm Alex. My handle on I think everything is greenwings.andthings. I
love that.
I renamed my pages after Kiwi because I'm like, you know what? I want to do something because I think she's like my like soul bird. Like, I think when I lose her, I'm gonna lose my mind. But like,
I can't even think about that.
Exactly. Like, I am avoiding it, but I'm like, you know what? I need to do something that's like, this is like my memorial to her or whatever. Because I don't know her age because she was just dumped. She's a
rescue, Kiwi.
Yes. Okay. She was put into a rescue a few years ago, a few years before I started.
And you still work there?
Like, I come back. I'll probably work in the summers, but since I'm in college, I'm not there right now. I'm about 3 hours away.
Yeah.
So in spirit, I still work. But
So you got her from this rescue where you worked,
yes.
right?
So she was just a lot of our birds, the large demographic of them is just we don't want them anymore. Here you go. They don't know what they are, they don't have names. Like a lot of them don't come with names and they're like, I don't just here. We don't know how old they are, when the last time they've been to the vet is. It's very much like an uneducated crowd. And I think
Yeah.
it's purely just kids that see them at PetSmart and they're like, oh my gosh, I want one so bad. And then they're like, I don't like this thing. Get it away from me. So
Yeah,
a
they
lot
don't
of our
understand it. And
demographic.
then there's aggression and biting
Hmm.
and behavioral issues. And
Hmm.
then that's why parrots end up being I think one of the most rehomed pets.
Oh
They end up
yeah,
in
ours
rescues
is,
all the times,
yeah.
all the time, because
Hmm.
people don't realize what they're getting themselves into. And that's why I also
Hmm.
love your content, because you're always informing people of what they're getting themselves into with
Hmm.
birds.
Yeah, and I definitely liked taking that approach to my social media because I had no idea what I was getting into. Like I wanted to have Kiwi as my own, but I knew nothing about her. All I knew was she was just this little green parrot that I thought was so cute. And eventually I started researching. I was like, okay, so Kiwi, she's a Quaker parrot, she's Quaker parrot, monk parakeet. They get a bunch of different names. Um,
But Quaker, I think, is the most popular.
yeah, I've heard that one the most, but I was like, okay, so this is what she is. Now, what do I do with that information? I was like, you know what? She doesn't have a name. So I named her Kiwi, which I know is so basic, but she responded to it like that. She was like, I would be like, come here, Kiwi. And she'd be like, she was so
Cute.
like, she just clinged to me right away. Like, I mean, just bonded with me very quickly. I got very lucky with her to be so trusting of me. I think she had a relatively good owner in the past, but probably just didn't like how clingy she was because she's definitely
Mhm.
very social. She tolerates other birds well. She does really well with people. However, she does like to bite ears, I learned. She likes ears. But I just started looking at, all the species we had in the rescue. Like we've got a cockatoo who, oh my gosh, I want to take her and make her mine one day. She is so cute. Her name is Tia. She is so cute. She's missing feathers from the chest, still like permanently. She
Mm.
pulled for so long that she got the follicle damage, to the point where they're not really going to grow back. She'll get like one here and one here, but like it's pretty bare. So I
Gosh.
just tell her she's a naked little chicken, but she was left alone a lot, and cockatoos are Velcro birds. Like, I mean, clingy as can
Really?
be. And they left her, that's their like nickname is a Velcro bird, basically.
Oh
Like
my.
they are that clingy. And I mean, I don't know if you follow Pickles the cockatoo, but like she is always like up on her owner like this, like a little baby, like a toddler with feathers.
I've
And
seen
it's
a lot
so
of
funny.
cockatoos do that on social. Yeah.
They love to spend time with their owner. So the couple that had her they wanted to travel like a lot. And so they left her by herself instead of like with a sitter or, somebody else. So she started like self-mutilating and things like that. So it's kind of because she just was lonely. Like she was just bored and
They would
lonely
travel
and
and leave her at home by herself with
mhm,
no pet sitter.
not that I'm aware of. No. So she is, thank goodness she was rolled up to us. And I mean, they
Yeah.
haven't been back to see her. They have yet to come back to see her,
This
which
is an
I would be.
important thing, because I've
Hmm.
talked about travel when you become a
Hmm.
bird mom or even a dog
Hmm.
mom on the channel and on
Yeah.
the podcast before. And it
Hmm.
really is a lifestyle change. If you get pets,
Oh, yeah.
especially exotic pets like birds, and you love to travel, wait until you've done all your traveling that you've wanted to
Yes.
do and then start a pet family, because you
Hmm.
can't leave them alone. That's completely irresponsible. And just to this
Yeah.
situation, it can show you what can happen to a bird. And
Hmm.
you need to find a responsible pet sitter, and you become your
Yeah.
bird's flock. You can't just be taking off for weeks or months at a time. It really
Hmm.
has an impact on them.
Oh, yeah. She definitely took it pretty rough, but I mean, she's much happier. She's gotten her personality back. She
Oh,
is
that's
like
so
a little
sweet.
picky toddler when it comes to vegetables. She's one of ours that like I had to transition them to vegetables because even the people that started the rescue, since it was a garden center, they weren't planning to rescue, but people were like, we've got these animals, can you take it? So one turns into many, and then you've got a whole thing going on. That's kind of why I do my content the way I do, is because I'm sure a lot of people are like me, where they're like, oh, I know nothing, but I
Yeah.
want a bird. I think they're really neat, but I know absolutely nothing. So I feel like you have to give them the just the bad details of it, but also the positives that you get out of it. Because I think they're great animals. I think they're awesome, and
Yeah.
my best friend in the whole wide world. And I just would not have it any other way. But I definitely had to start looking into eating habits for them, and I had to transition them all to seed very differently, or all off of seed very differently. Tia would have to eat out of my hand. She had to sit there on my hand and eat out of it to be interested in it. I think she was just scared of it. So when
Yeah.
she realized I was holding it and it wasn't just disintegrating me, she was like, okay, I think it's relatively safe. And then the outside ones that we keep in like the aviary together, it's like 99% budgies, which just breaks my heart, to be honest, that it's so many budgies from pet stores. And
Really? And you
yeah,
know what?
but
People probably think it's just a little bird. How much work
mm-hmm,
could it be? Not
mm-hmm,
realizing that whether it's a small bird or a big bird,
mm-hmm,
it's a lot of work. With the budgies, sometimes people think it's not going to be a lot of work, and not realizing that whether it's a small bird or a big bird, it's still a lot of
mm-hmm,
work. And it's a lot
mm-hmm,
of different things to learn and to get cages and healthy diets and pellets and toys and
mm-hmm,
perches and all these different things. And I saw a reel that you did, which I
mm-hmm,
loved, where someone asked you, I want to get a bird. Which bird should I
mm-hmm.
get as a beginner bird or like a starter bird? And there's not really a beginner bird, is there?
No, there's not. I think they're marketed as beginner bird, which is why they're so cheap at pet stores.
Ugh, I
But
can't handle pet
I
stores.
hate that. I can't. It's like a whole other thing.
Oh
But
my
yeah, budgies
gosh.
can learn to talk quite a bit. I think it takes them some time, but they
Yeah.
can learn to talk quite a bit, and they're very smart birds. I mean, people
Yeah.
don't think much of them, but they're very
Yeah.
smart, but they're also very timid. We have an issue at the place with children sometimes. Children are definitely not very gentle to all animals. I've
Mhm.
definitely had to yell at a few kids for trying to feed them rocks and throw rocks at them.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
I know.
I wanted to circle
It,
back because we were talking about beginner birds and starter birds and how
mhm,
people ask this question. And whether you're
mhm.
getting a small bird or a big bird, it's going to be a lot of work. It's going to
Oh yeah.
be a lot of shopping. It's going to be a lot of
Hmm.
learning. And I personally think that probably a smaller bird, if you're like serious about researching and doing all the right
Hmm.
things and providing a good life, and you understand the lifestyle change and what a bird comes with and behaviors and all
Hmm.
these different things and hormones, then I think a smaller bird I would probably recommend in that case. Because in
Yeah.
my
Hmm.
situation, like we have conures, we've only ever had
Hmm.
conures. I love all types of parrots and I'm mesmerized by all the different species, but I would
Hmm.
be a little bit more intimidated with a macaw.
Oh yeah.
And I would be
Yeah.
a little bit worried that if it was to bite me, it would not be a bite like Mia's bite, where I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
ouch. I would
Yeah.
probably lose a finger.
Hmm.
So I think
Yeah.
that there are some differences between big birds and little birds, but I wanted you to also talk a little bit about what you mentioned in your reel, how like you need to consider space and all
Hmm.
of these types of things.
So when you do look to get a bird, I definitely would say start with a smaller bird unless you just feel like I was intimidated when I met Tia just because she's so much larger. I still am getting used to handling her.
Mhm.
Um, but I definitely think smaller birds can be quote unquote easier as far as space. That's really the only thing that it's gonna benefit, that and just the intimidation factor really and getting used to handling a bird. But space varies based on your bird, especially their wingspan, because obviously like a little conure, their wingspan is about that big. But you've got a macaw that's like several feet of a wingspan. So that cage size is going to jump it's going to jump a couple feet at least, like in dimensions.
Yeah.
So, if you
And those
don't
cages
have,
get significantly more expensive.
oh yeah, that too. The budget is a very big thing to take into account. And you definitely can go cheaper routes with cages, as in like reselling and finding stuff in good condition, but that's just not directly from a pet store or something. You can knock off a couple bucks, sometimes a couple $100 if you get lucky. Um, but those cages are going to jump in size. That's why I definitely wouldn't feel comfortable bringing Tia here versus Kiwi, because I have a section of space that would fit her cage behind me like perfectly. But if I was to get Tia's cage in here, I mean, it would take up way too much room, and it's just not suitable for her. So you kind of have to think about what spaces you have in your house that you can fit certain dimensions, which I think I wrote something about like measuring to see how much space you have. Because if you're like, that spot would be great for a bird. If I really want this big bird, is this cage going to fit? And if not, can I make it fit, or should I just downsize and go with a smaller one? So space
And
is
you
a big
also want to
thing,
make sure
and
that they
just
have room to fly around in your home.
yeah, yeah, just like even your house itself, and making sure that it's a safe environment for your bird to fly. And
Bird
if you have a
proofing.
lot of yes, if you like have a lot of valuables and cords everywhere, and like you've got to like make sure you have
Fans,
those things. Yes,
ceiling
like put
fans,
away.
candles.
Yeah, you have to like make sure you have all the things checked off before you bring them into your home. I mean, when I got here, I told my roommates about it, and just how there's like we can't have candles anyways, so that's good. But
Yeah.
like fragrances, things like that, even like car fresheners, I was like, okay, I'm gonna take this car freshener out that I've got, let my car air out and not use it until really ever, and because she'll be in my car. But like, once I'm getting her, I'm done with it. And just
Yeah.
letting all the fragrance out.
Air
Just
purifiers.
different, yes, yes, just very different things that are going to affect your bird's lifestyle that you kind of have to think about before bringing one into your home. Even just, like you said, like the Teflon, like the cookware, what are you cooking with right now? Are you cooking with Teflon? If you are, you might want to switch first and see how some different pans work out, because you may not like the first one you try. You may have to figure it out before you fully switch brands, and then you're like, okay, I'm ready, I'm content with this lifestyle, like I'm good. um there's a lot of things to think about when you bring
Yeah.
one into your
There's
home.
a lot of changes. Like
Oh
I
yeah.
don't use perfume or body sprays. I haven't in
Mhm.
years, but it's also probably better for my
Mhm.
body and because your skin absorbs everything. But I
Mhm.
don't know, are you familiar with Bath and Body Works?
Oh yeah. Oh
So
yeah.
I loved Bath and Body Works, and
Yes.
their candles smell so good. I have not come across
Mhm.
any candles where you light just one wick and you can
Mhm.
smell it everywhere. But inhaling
Mhm.
that is probably not good for your lungs. Synthetic
I have heard
fragrances
that.
and all this other stuff.
Mhm.
And imagine what it would do for your birds. And they have such small
Mhm.
lungs and their
Mhm.
respiratory systems are so sensitive. So, yeah,
Oh yeah.
that has been cut out of my life, and I haven't even stepped
Yeah.
into a Bath and Body in years.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a big change, but it's, what's funny is I feel like the changes are good for you as well as a person,
Yeah.
because like you said, like it's probably not good for me to be using that either. And you can compare a lot of things that you do with them or for them into your own life. Like I
Mhm.
like to say that, feeding them, you should be able to eat it too. I mean,
Yes.
unless, pellets may not taste great, but if you
But you
shouldn't
could eat
ingest
them
it,
probably.
yeah, if you shouldn't ingest it, they shouldn't ingest it. That's kind of how
Right.
I feel about it. Um, just because, I like to have the advice. Sometimes parents are just very apprehensive when it comes to their food that's not seed, that they're not used to. So sometimes I'm like, you may have to sit down and take a bite of it with them. Like you may have to put it on a spoon and at least
Yeah.
get it close to your mouth enough for them to be like, oh my gosh, I want to eat what she's having.
Yeah, because
So
birds
like if
love to
you
do
can't
that.
eat it, oh yeah, oh yeah. So I'm like, if they can't, if you can't eat it, why would you want them to eat it? That's how I feel about it, at least.
Yeah.
Just because of the way I do feed her, I feel like if it's not good for me, it's probably not good for her.
There are
And I
some
looked
human
into,
foods that you should never share with your bird. Like you
oh
shouldn't be
yeah.
giving them chips and definitely
Hmm.
never chocolate or avocado and things like that.
Yeah.
But I
Hmm.
also feel like Mia helps me make better choices because sometimes I'm like in the
Hmm.
afternoon, I want a snack. And I'm like, I could just crack those chips. But if I have kiwis, I can share them with Mia. And so it's better
Yeah.
for me and it's better for her.
I did a reel about pellet ingredients because people will ask me, they're like, what pellets should I get? Why is seeds so bad for them? So I was like, I'm gonna like look into what's in all of these things. And I noticed a lot of brands that are super popular have a lot of gross things in them. Like, I looked into the Zupreme brand.
Mhm.
Um, and their regular pellets are not too bad, but their colored ones are definitely a big no for me. They have artificial dyes in them, a bunch of weird things. Like if you can't pronounce it, it's probably not that great.
Yeah.
But
I always like to
it's,
see
I
a
mean,
short ingredient list and things that I can
mm-hmm,
pronounce and I know what they all are.
mm-hmm,
And I know that they're all good things and healthy
yeah,
things. Because when I see a
mm-hmm,
long list and it's like this and that, and then it's numbers and
yes.
letters and dashes, I'm like, that's not a
What
good
is that?
list. And there's a lot
Yeah.
of brands that will like create these pellets to appeal to the
Mm-hmm,
owners. Like they're different shapes, they're little
mm-hmm,
bananas, or they're bright
yeah.
and colorful. And so people think, oh, my bird will love that without checking the ingredients. And
Mm-hmm,
ingredients matter, and not all pellets are created equal. I think that,
mm-hmm,
the natural sources from like food,
mm-hmm,
veggies, legumes, grains, nuts, beans, eggs, all this stuff, utilize real food to get real nutrients into your bird's body and
yeah.
also your own.
Kiwi setter just got so much brighter when she started eating better. Like she just looked like a brand new bird. Like, I mean, I was like,
Yeah,
who are
diet
you?
is
Like
huge. I talk about diet all the
she,
time because it impacts their health,
mhm,
their feathers, their energy, their behavior, like just
mhm,
everything. Diet is so important. It's
mhm,
like, I feel like one of the
mhm,
cores. Yeah.
mhm,
But you're in school, you're in college. So I want to pick your brain a little bit. Tell me,
mhm,
what are you studying? You're living the dorm life and
mhm,
you have Kiwi, your rescue bird. So where is Kiwi while you're at school? And I also saw online that you were sharing that you're working on getting paperwork to get Kiwi to
mhm,
live with you. You've prepped your roommates. So for
mhm,
anybody who's listening that's also going off to school and they have a pet bird, I think that this would be some valuable
mhm.
information for them to know, how can I have my bird at school with me?
Not necessarily a difficult process, but it is more difficult than people make it out to be, I will say. Because you do have to register your animal as an ESA, which is an emotional support animal. And I will say, I will preface, do not buy the online packages that say ESA. It's not recognized by the state, does nothing for you other than makes you pay $70 and you get a little certificate that does nothing.
And
So
which state are
don't
you
do
in?
that. I'm in Texas, but I don't know
Okay.
that most places will do that. I think most of the time it's really just a scam to get you to pay money to get a
Mhm.
certificate. But at least for the dorm lifestyle, I guess, for us, we have to contact our disability office. And so you do have to have some sort of mental or physical impairment or disability that affects you on the day to day. You do have to have something from, I guess, either a doctor or a psychiatrist, depending on your situation. So you can't just have an animal to have an animal. You definitely have to have a need for that animal. So I had to submit my psychiatric paperwork and get that to go through and then fill out my rights and privacy and all that sorts of things. And then they did an over the phone interview with me, basically saying, okay, so this is what your paperwork says. Tell me about each one of these things and how they affect you. And then that's how they evaluate, okay, you actually do need this animal. So I had to talk about all the different things that were on there and why, and say this is how she aids me in these activities and for this reason, basically. And ESAs are for housing only. So you can't bring them, to class with you like a service dog or anything like that. Like they have to stay in here. And but a parrot specifically, the only reason I am good with that, I guess, is because I do have a roommate that does online classes on the days that I'm not here for longer. I'm only gone for about 3 hours a day. But while I'm not here, she's here. So she still has company while I'm away. So she won't get lonely or start self-mutilating. But that's another thing you have to think about is my bird gonna be alone most of the time? And so I had to think about that in my schedule. And if you want to start working, what is that gonna look like? And then as far as paperwork, you do have to get a letter of recommendation from your like primary caregiver, basically like whoever's treating you actively for this disability, basically. So, you can't really use paperwork that's from 5 years ago and you're not dealing with it anymore, because then they'll ask your doctor and be like, hey, is this still going on? Do they still need this animal? And if they say no, you don't get to have the animal. So you do really have to have a need for an animal if you do bring them on campus. So that's why it's not as easy as people think it's going to be. Because they think they can be like, oh, I miss my pet, I'm really sad without her. But like really and truly, you have to have something that affects your day to day to be able to bring her. But
him.
Yes. And it's not as easy as people think it's gonna be. So it's definitely something I like to share, is because I posted a reel. I was like, oh, I'm lonely, I miss her. And my comments were just, sign her up for an ESA. Here's what you have to do. I'm like, I know, but that's not it. That's not how you do. That's not that simple. There's so much work that goes into it. But you have to provide them, like for a dog, it would be, or other animals, it'd be like vaccines, things like that. You have to make sure they're up to date on everything.
Yeah.
But since she's a parrot, they don't require anything like that. They just require a picture of her size,
Her cuteness.
about how big her. Yes, obviously, I made sure to tell them how cute she was. But you have to provide them basically all the information about this pet and why you're bringing it and the species. I mean, just everything. So it's not a hard process necessarily to go through, but to meet those requirements is not as simple as people think it is. So you do have to have something that impairs you on a day-to-day, which I think a lot of people don't realize.
Yeah. And I love that you also mentioned that, you're thinking about your bird even when you're in class, or like if you were to get a job, who is going to keep her company and care for her. So where are you at with this process? Like, is Kiwi coming soon? You don't need to tell us everything, but is Kiwi coming soon, or is there still a bit of the process left?
There's still a bit of process. I did apply for jobs, so I'm gonna see what my schedule's like. So I'll probably give it a little while too, just to see how often I'm gonna be gone. And if I think I'm gone too much, I probably won't bring her. Just for her own sake. Right now she's staying at the rescue with other birds. So if anything, she'd be happier there than here by herself, where she just would get lonely.
Yeah.
So I definitely wanted to give my schedule get a good feel for it and how often I would be here. But right now all I need is the letter of recommendation, but unfortunately I don't know if I'm gonna get it because my parents are not a fan of Kiwi. So I don't know if they'll let me bring her. They've been very much no bird. So I don't know if I'll get to bring her for sure. But I know at least next year I will get to bring her when I'm not living on campus, and she'll be in an apartment with me, hopefully. So she may be there for a little longer, but I'm going to do my best to get her here if I can.
Oh, well, my fingers and my toes are crossed for you. What were some of the things that you view as really not doing the best that we can by our birds?
Some of the things really, like I touched on, was like the all seed diet, just because it's deteriorating your bird's health, even if you don't know it. And it's more so, I guess I would consider abuse if you're doing it on purpose. A lot of people don't know, and that's why I say don't beat yourself up. I had no idea once too, but here's what you can do to change. And I like when people ask me in my comments, they're like, what should I do? And I'm like, I have some recipes pinned. This is what they should eat. Then I can educate them further and say, this is why. And then they're like, okay, great, cool, I understand now. So the seed diet is a big thing. And
The
I
small
don't think
cramped
I
cages.
included it. Yes, that one is big because even your little birds need to be able to fly while they're caged. And it also goes with letting them have out of cage time too, because if they're stuck in there all day, I mean, if I was stuck in this room all day, I would hate it. I mean, I would get bored at some point and
Yeah.
it would just go poorly. So, I mean, think about a bird stuck in an even smaller room that they just don't have a lot of enjoyment in, and they can't use those instincts and explore and try new things and feel new textures and things like that. So it's just you're giving them like prison time. I mean, that's really and truly what it is. If you keep them in this tiny cramped cage, it just feels like a prison for them, and I can't imagine how they feel. We got one a bare-eyed cockatoo, and her name was Mooney. She was the
Moody.
sweetest little thing, so cute. But she was brought in and she was in a cage, probably about that big. She is about that big. She had a water bowl that was about that big, a food bowl that was a hang-on one. It wasn't a bowl. It was like one of those ones for hamsters. Like it was not a
So she
real
barely fit in this cage.
food bowl.
She could definitely not spread her wings. And if she tried to stretch
Oh,
out
not
her
at
neck, she'd
all.
probably reach the top.
Yes, definitely. And she had a broken foot that they had no idea about. No
Oh.
idea. I mean, I literally within the first 5 minutes of looking at her, I was like, her toes are crossed like this. Was she born with a deformity? Was she been injured? And they were like, what do you mean? Like, I mean, I had no idea. So she was in distress when we brought her in. I mean, just so stressed out and confused and just puzzled as to what was going on.
Poor
And this is
thing.
her. This is her.
Well, you have to send me that picture.
I will. She
What
is
a cutie.
adorable. And I mean, just, I couldn't imagine. Her cage still had plastic on it from when they unwrapped it 2 years ago. And
Oh
then,
my
like,
gosh.
her tray had no paper, so it was just covered in poop. I mean,
If
covered in it.
you are not going to take care of
Oh,
your bird, then don't get a
yeah.
bird, please.
We got her, we literally posted on Facebook like that minute. We were like, does anyone have an extra cage that we can get her? Because normally when we get them, we either put them in the aviary or they come with a cage. And normally the cages are pretty decent for them actually. So we haven't had to worry about getting more cages. We do have donations, but we normally can just leave them where they're at because it's a good size. But we were like, I mean, we were on Facebook. We were like, does anyone have, an extra cage? She really needs something else. And she just had nowhere to go in this little cage.
And did you get a
And
cage?
we did. This is her in her cage. She
Oh,
was so much
wonderful.
happier.
That looks like a much bigger
She,
cage.
but
So
she
cute.
was so much happier. And it just is mind blowing how much of a difference that space makes for them, which is why I'm like, please get them a big cage that fits them and not
Yeah.
something that is just convenient for your space.
I
Make
always
it
say the bigger the
convenient for their
better.
space. That's what I'm like. No cage really is too big when you think about it.
Yeah, the
I mean,
bigger the better. And I know it
mm-hmm,
depends on your budget, but
mm-hmm,
I think that that's something also to consider. If you want to
mm-hmm,
have birds, you have to understand that there's also a financial responsibility. Not everybody
mm-hmm.
wants to talk about money and everybody works hard for it.
Yeah.
But, when it comes to having a pet, like especially with a bird, you got to get a big
Mm-hmm.
cage and you want to get a good quality cage with good bar spacing. You have to get
Yeah.
toys and perches, and every so often you have to get new toys and new
New stuff.
perches and like pellets and treats and dish bowls and tree stands. There's just so
Mm-hmm.
much to get. Like I have so much stuff
There is.
now, but I've
Mm-hmm.
been buying stuff for years. So now I
Mm-hmm.
have a collection. But when I first
Yeah.
started off, of course, you don't have to buy everything at once, but you do need to
Mm-hmm.
get like the basics, including a nice, good cage.
Yeah, that's partially why I don't have her here yet, is because I need a job first. Like I know I need money first. So I want to work for a good solid chunk of time, make some money, and then go from there. Like I want to make sure I have the money in case something goes wrong
You're so
or, her
responsible.
cage bit. I mean, I this is like the one thing I have thought out through and through. Like this is if I did nothing right, this is the only thing I would do right. Like I mean, I put everything I can into this.
So we talked about some of the things where we should do better by our birds by not clipping
Mm-hmm.
their wings, getting bigger
Mm-hmm.
cages, not
Mm-hmm.
supporting chain pet stores was another one you mentioned in the video. And I think we talked a bit about pet stores as well.
Mm-hmm.
All seed diets, letting natural predator animals around your bird, releasing
Mm-hmm.
your bird when you don't want them, which you were also
Mm-hmm.
mentioning. Yeah, to that point, I also want to say that a lot of people don't realize that captive bred birds, they haven't learned how to survive in the wild or out and about. So if you release them,
Yeah.
they're not going to survive for a very long
Mm-hmm.
time. They're used to
Mm-hmm.
being in a home, having
Yeah.
food, having safety. They haven't
Mm-hmm.
learned how to adapt and survive in the wild. So you're not doing
Yeah.
that bird any good.
Yeah, and it's not even if you were to release them, this is not their native habitat. Like this is not where they
Exactly.
came from to begin with. So why would they do well anyways? Like it doesn't make sense really in any scenario on why you would release a bird into your urban city that doesn't have
Right.
hardly enough, trees, whatever, and no food for them. It's just not their
Exactly.
natural source. I mean, even like macaws, they'll eat a mud. It's on like they have like these big like rock wall basically things that are covered in this mud that they'll eat, and it flushes those toxins out of their body.
Is
Like
that
that's
like in the
not here.
jungle? In the Amazon?
Hmm. Yeah,
Cool.
they eat like this mud that gets all the bad out of their body basically, because most of their diet is not actually completely great for them. I don't know if it's the stuff itself is poisonous or if it's like if they eat some seeds, but they'll eat that on that mud a lot. And it'll help flush it out.
So I think that off of that, a lot of people also worry about their birds flying away. And so that's why wing
Hmm.
clipping has become so popular because they're
Yes.
doing it for their bird safety. They don't want their bird to fly away. Well, what if your bird cut off your legs because they don't want you to walk away? So
Bingo.
I always say, like, it's the same thing. Like, when you clip a bird's wings, you're taking away what makes a bird, which is
Hmm.
flying with those beautiful wings and those bright colored feathers. And Mia is agreeing in the
Yeah.
background. Can you hear her?
Yeah.
So,
She's like,
talk to
please.
everybody a little bit about why you're so passionate about being anti-wing clipping and what the cons are, and why it's so important to let a bird have flight.
So starting with your bird's anatomy, basically what they've got, it's kind of like you could compare it to a human body. If you put your arms straight out like this, you've got your arm that's like a wing, compare it to the wing, then you've got your chest muscles, right? And they go down and they hit your sternum. So think about that as like your bird's anatomy. They've got their wings and they have these big, strong chest muscles that are meant to take them across the jungle. And they've got their keel bone, which is like their sternum kind of. This keel bone will start to show actually if these muscles get worn down, and it's very sharp. So they have muscle across it to protect it as well. So I've actually seen some birds that have lost their flight, and this bone becomes really sharp and jagged, and it can cut through their skin. So if you let your bird go without flight so much, it can start to make lacerations in their skin, and it just causes so many issues. But
Oh
that's
my
kind of, I know, the
gosh.
drastic part. But
That's the
cutting their
extreme.
wings, yes, but cutting their wings, it's going to be extreme no matter what, because you're taking away their transportation, what they're naturally going to do in their life. And a startled bird will fly, no matter what, will fly. Their
They
wings
just
may
won't
be
have
clipped.
good flight. They
Hmm.
won't be strong
They're going
flyers.
to get off the ground, but they're going to crash and injure themselves. That's what's going to happen, is they're going to get an injury. And even taking them outside with clipped wings, they're still going to fly away. If a gust of wind gets up under their wings, bye bye. Like they're gone still. They're just going to crash land somewhere and not be able to get around very well.
And then you won't be able to
So
find them.
exactly. So no matter what, you can lose your bird outside, like no matter what. So with them clipping, it's very commonly compared to a haircut or a nail trim, which is the most wrong thing I've ever heard. because they say it doesn't hurt. Well, it may not physically hurt the bird in the process. They may not feel it, but if you get close enough, another issue is if you butcher those wings, you can hit blood and they can bleed out through there
Yeah.
because they've got a blood supply to their feathers to keep them strong and healthy. So
So you
clipping
could
them,
physically hurt them. There's
taking away
always
their
that
flight.
chance.
Yes, there is a chance when it comes to clipping that you could physically hurt them in the process. And taking away that flight means you're taking away this motion, and this motion gets rid of all their chest muscles. They just deteriorate really as they go on. And so, like I said, that keel bone will start to show. They can't get anywhere, and
And
it
flight
takes
helps
a
them
super long
develop
time.
these muscles and
Mm-hmm.
keep them built.
Mm-hmm.
They need those
Yes.
muscles.
And the way their anatomy is, they're built for flight. Their bones are more hollow because they need to be able to get off the ground. Even their
Be
skulls
lighter.
are lighter because they need to get off the ground.
Mhm.
Everything about their bodies is meant to fly. The way their lungs are organized, the way their digestive system is organized, is meant to fly. Their muscles are meant to protect their insides. They're meant to get them from point A to point B, and taking that away takes away everything down that list that I just said. So, clipping their wings is just, there's not one good thing about it that I can think of. Not one good thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will clip also to force their bird to bond with them, which I think is just not good at all either. So this like forcible bonding can cause them to be very stressed. They may start pulling their feathers. They may start self-mutilating. They may fly into things on purpose. I mean, like they may just basically try to take themselves out because they are so unhappy and they are so scared of you, because just grabbing them like that when they can't get away will scare them to death. I mean, they just do not like it. And they're not supposed to. I mean, they're wild animals. They're not supposed to enjoy just being like that.
You have to be like really gentle with your approach, and you have to really get to know and understand how birds behave and how they function and how their behaviors serve a function and how to approach them, how to bond with them, because it's very different than having like other pets. And so it really takes time and effort for bonding, for that trust to build. You have to give it time. And I think that clipping a bird's wing is not the right way to go about it, because immediately the first thing that you're doing is, Mia is really agreeing today. The first thing that you're doing is you're losing your bird's trust by taking away their wings. They're going to look at you and be like, you took this away from me. And it also has such an impact on them psychologically and emotionally. Sometimes they end up, plucking feathers and being aggressive and depressed and all these different things because they can't do what comes naturally to them.
Yeah, they basically, I mean, like think about it as you don't have a leg, but you really want to run. Like, what are you going to do? You're going to get frustrated. They're going to get frustrated. They can't go anywhere, and all this pent up energy is just going to go into biting you and telling you, I hate you for this. Like, you cannot expect a good bond with your bird if you're going to take away their natural way of life, basically. And it just makes them so depressed and angry and just all around so just mentally deranged, like just all over the place. But I have noticed the ones missing those like big flight feathers are just not, they struggle, and they're very timid around people. Those are the ones that stay away from me the most, because I think people have just broken their trust time and time again, and they just don't like anybody anymore. And so I just don't think you'll ever be able to gain that bird's trust.
So if someone has rescued or adopted a bird, or they now have the bird from a breeder or whoever, and they didn't have the choice and they cut that bird's wings, and now they're wondering, well, this wasn't my choice, or I didn't do this, or I rescued a bird and they don't have their wings. Will their wings or their flight feathers grow back? And what is your advice to someone who's listening that might be like, I want to help my bird be able to fly again? What can I do?
So there's a couple things. As far as growing the feathers back, it can happen. Sometimes it won't, though. So they will molt and grow some feathers back. It may take some time to get every single one of them, but sometimes that can take, I mean, years to get all of them, and some may continue to be missing one or two. But if they are only missing those one or two, they should still be able to fly relatively well. But I've seen a lot of just like some animal, I guess like therapy videos that they'll do where you can kind of hold your bird and let them go up and down, flap their wings, start getting those muscles back. That's going to be the biggest thing, is helping them rehabilitate those muscles. And you can put them, I've seen people put them in little like carriers kind of, and let them hold them so they can flap their wings. And you can also kind of help them gain their confidence back in flying with slow flight processes. A lot of people will start with one thing here, and they'll just reach and climb over. And slowly you'll move them backwards to where they start to have to use those wings. And that can help them build those muscles back too.
Once
So
they've
that's a big
grown the
thing.
flight
And
feathers back, right?
yeah. But you can start that a little bit before, just by letting them flap their wings from, little short distances, helping them flap their wings. But diet is also a big thing, just to make sure they have the nutrients to molt
That's
and
what I
grow
was
those
going to
back.
bring up next.
Yeah. They definitely need their proper nutrients to grow. I mean, it's kind of like you have to be eating properly to grow as a human. It's kind of the same as a bird. But it's definitely a slow process. I've had some people talk to me in the comments. They're like, I have one that's clipped. He's trying to fly, but I don't want him to get hurt. What can I do? And I kind of suggested, for this instance, I guess, was to put like some towels down or something really soft that he can land on, so he doesn't keep breaking those flight feathers off. Because I think that's what happened, is he would hit the floor and the wing would hit the floor and then it would fall off. So I suggested basically putting something really soft down or cushion to help when they do land, they aren't just smacking on the floor. They're hitting something like a pillow, and they can catch themselves and relax their wings, and they don't have to worry about hitting some hard surface. So I think it kind of depends on the situation, but for that one, I would recommend making sure they're safe. They're in a safe environment, and for their cages, making sure it's easily accessible. Maybe putting stuff somewhat closer to the ground so they don't have to climb as high and try to use those wings to pull themselves up. So just making things accessible for them in the long run, and trying to maybe help rehabilitate them sometimes. And if you feel you can't do it yourself, there are definitely experts out there that would love to help, I'm sure, and some physical therapists that would love to help your bird. It's just a matter of reaching out to a vet, probably.
Yeah, and finding the right vet. So
Yes.
we're going to wrap things up soon, but before we wrap things up, I also saw that I know that you work at a rescue, and you also posted that your dream is to open your own bird rescue. So I'm sure it was inspired by, being at the Parrot Rescue, but tell me a little bit about that. And maybe there'll be someone who ends up listening to the podcast that ends up reaching out, and you can work together to make your dreams come true. So share your dreams with us.
I'd love to. I mean, I would love to own a rescue. I would love to just rescue all the birds if I could, but obviously I know it's not that like simple. So I did start thinking about the career process for a rescue, and I do know that it's going to be mostly nonprofit, and it's going to be very much out of pocket expenses. And I thought about maybe an easier way to do it. I say easier way, a way that makes it happen a little more financially stable. And I did think about going into avian medicine, just to maybe start a vet, but then do rescue and rehoming with it, just so I could kind of check both those boxes, and get to do the medical aspect of it, because I think that knowledge would be very helpful to have running a rescue too. And I did think about maybe in the meantime trying to volunteer at some, and just getting a feel for how they run and what it's like in that environment. The closest one is like an hour and a half away though from here. So it's gonna be quite the hike if I do go down there. But I was looking into it, and I know it's definitely not the most profitable business in a way. So I wanted to try to do it a financially stable way, and maybe start like a vet business. And once that's off the ground, we can take in birds and rehome and adopt and do certain things like that. Plus, I feel like it'd be a fun way I could take Kiwi to work with me, and she could come with me.
Yeah. That's so awesome. I
think-
love that. You got to dream big. And if you can dream
Mhm.
it, you can do it. What you think about, you bring
Exactly.
about. So think all those good, positive
sure hope
vibes so
I
that we
sure
can
hope
help
so.
as many birds as possible.
See what the future holds.
Awesome.
I'm
Well,
curious.
my fingers are crossed for you. And thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. It was so awesome to chat with you and just talk about all things birds.
I had so much fun, and I was so excited, like jumping up and down when I saw that you messaged me about it. Like I texted my boyfriend. I said, "Guess what? Guess what I'm gonna do?" And he was like, "What?" I'm like, "I'm gonna do a podcast." I was
Not just any
so
podcast, the Parrot
I know.
podcast, the
I was
one
like,
and
I
only.
get to do the Parrot podcast, and he was so excited for me, and I have been counting down to do this. Like I was so thrilled to do this.
Thanks for tuning in to the Parrot podcast. I'm your host, Sandra from Poodles and Parrots.